Hello and welcome back to my channel What If Deku 2.0. Join us as we delve into the realms of fanfiction and fantasy, bringing you the best stories and discussions. Today, we're kicking off part 2 of our series, What If Deku Got All Sentient Quirks? If you enjoy this video, please give it a like and subscribe for more content in the future. The author of this story is Goldingient8 from Archive of Our Own. All the relevant links are in the description. Feel free to say hello to the author on their profile. Now, let's dive into the fanfic. Todoroki opened the door to the monitor room, met with polite clapping and quiet cheering from the rest of the class. He grunted, though Izuku could just barely make out a hint of a smile under that mask. He walked inside, immediately moving to stand next to Yaoyorozu. Ashido skipped in behind him, a spring in her step and a smirk on her face. Asui dragged Kirishima behind her, the redhead practically catatonic after his defeat. All Might boomed. An excellent display from both sides. Now, what mistakes were made in this match? Yaoyorozu raised her hand immediately. The largest blunder was assuming, again, that the heroes would enter through the front door. While Asui, "Call me Tsu, Kiro." The raven-haired girl bowed her head. While Tsu did account for possible overhead entry by placing the bomb on the 4th floor rather than the 5th, the heroes still only had to search 2 floors. Still, the villains at least had the foresight to watch both the door and the windows, especially considering Mainta's ploy in the first match. Izuku frowned. Though, I find it odd that Todoroki seemed to chase down Kirishima almost single-mindedly. And when he did go after Tsu, he didn't even use his quirk. What's up with that? Todoroki grunted. My partner brought up the possibility that ice may have an adverse effect on her amphibian biology. I chose not to face her, since I reasoned that I could have caused her undue harm that would have otherwise been avoided. Tsu nodded at him gratefully. And I'm glad you did, Kiro. Whenever I get too cold, I start to hibernate. And if the change in temperature is too sharp, it's really bad for me, Kiro. Izuku nodded once. I see. Thanks for clearing that up. Kirishima slammed a fist into his palm. I just wish I could have done more. I feel so useless. Ashido rolled her eyes and smacked him upside the head. Chill out, you doofus. You held off Todoroki for a good couple minutes, and in a way, you kept him from teaming up with me against Tsu. Be proud of that. All Might announced, young Ashido is right, young Kirishima. While you should still consider what you did wrong, never be afraid to take pride in what you did right. In any case, time for the final match. He pulled the black box over from beside the mic and ruffled around for a bit, before pulling out a black ball inscribed with a J. Team J will play the villains against Team A as the heroes. Katsuki flipped through the floor plans of the building across the street, pausing and glancing up at where his teammate was switching between several flamboyant poses. Are you gonna be an arrogant prick the whole time, or are you gonna get over here so we can plan? Baguette huffed dramatically and stuck a finger in the air. A plan is unnecessary, mon ami, for I will dazzle all with my brilliant sparkle. Katsuki rolled his eyes. Sure you will, Baguette. Fine, if you want to run in, navel blazing, then go ahead. I'm gonna head in from the top for a pincer movement. Baguette pouted. But monsieur, if you do that, then nobody will be around for me to amaze. Katsuki scoffed. Save it. When you're licensed, go ahead and pose for the cameras all you want, but as long as you're my teammate, you're gonna shut up and take this seriously. Capich. Baguette sighed. No appreciation for talent. Katsuki grunted and turned back to the floor plans. Whatever. Suddenly, All Might announced, your 5 minutes of prep time are up. Hero team, you may now enter the building. As promised, Baguette immediately turned on his heel and made a beeline for the front door, strutting like a complete tool. Katsuki rolled his eyes, but reluctantly followed his partner. Abandoning him to his own devices likely wouldn't end well, especially considering Printer got on Grape's case for doing it in the first match. Baguette practically skipped through the hallways on the first floor, making sure to pose dramatically every time he noticed a camera, which happened far too often for Katsuki's liking. After the 7th time on the first floor alone, he clamped a hand around his other wrist to keep himself from dragging his partner along by that stupid cape. There's literally no reason to be so fancy, Baguette. Now get in gear, we've got a bomb to find. Baguette huffed. Patience, monsieur, an artiste cannot be rushed. Suddenly, Monkey appeared at the other end of the stairwell, launching himself down the hallway and slamming his thick tail into Baguette's stomach. The idiot slid backwards, coughing as dust got kicked up from the floor. Suddenly, he froze, before immediately grabbing his cape and scrubbing furiously at it. No, 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 my beautiful cape has been soiled by Pausier. This will not do. Katsuki groaned loudly, before launching himself forward and aiming a right hook at Monkey. The other student caught the blow with crossed arms, sliding back a couple feet. Katsuki barked, "Worry about your damn cape later. This is a combat exercise, not a goddamn fashion show." "But monsieur, I spent so much time and glitter making this cape almost as sparkly as I cannot let that effort go to such waste." Katsuki held himself back from slamming his palm into his face and resorted to letting off an explosion that sent Monkey retreating around the corner and up the stairs, if his hurried footsteps were any indication. Completely and utterly out of patience, he roughly grabbed Baguette's leg and slung him over his shoulder, before blasting off down the hallway. He tailed Monkey up to the 3rd floor, following the other blonde to a room away from the street with a single entrance. Inside, Roundface had the bomb floating up near the ceiling. She visibly paled upon seeing Katsuki blast around the corner, whereas Monkey took up a defensive stance. Quickly appraising the situation, he threw Baguette towards Roundface and shouted, "Make yourself useful." Turning to Monkey, he crouched and let off a few sparks for intimidation. "You and me, Wukong." Monkey immediately sprang forward, aiming a solid roundhouse towards Katsuki's face. He blocked it with his left arm and retaliated with a right hook, which was deflected and countered by a swinging tail. Katsuki grinned and ducked underneath, before aiming an uppercut with his left fist at Monkey's chin. It connected, and the other teen was lifted off the ground by the force. Katsuki attempted to follow up with a swift kick to the chest, but was interrupted by Baguette being flung at him from across the room at speeds that shouldn't have been possible. Roundface, he thought quickly, grabbing Baguette by the leg and throwing him at Monkey like an improvised bola. He turned to block her clumsy punch, before retaliating with a quick knee to the solar plexus. She hunched over, her cheeks bulging and her arms wrapped around her stomach protectively. Katsuki swore under his breath, turning his attention back to where Baguette was retreating from Monkey, using the recoil from his laser to propel himself through the air. Seeing that both villains were otherwise occupied, Katsuki blasted across the room, before leaping upward and grabbing one of the tail fins of the bomb, dragging it towards the ground. All Might announced, "The bomb has been secured, hero team wins." Immediately, Katsuki turned on his heel and strode over to where Roundface was kneeling on the floor, clutching her stomach. He started patting her on the back and muttered, "Sorry, didn't realize that nerve cluster would make you react like this. Can you turn off your quirk?" Roundface slowly placed her fingertips together and weakly announced, "R release." The bomb settled down, and Baguette crashed to the floor, his visor shattering on the ends and his armor crumpling. Monkey winced at the violent sound, but Katsuki was preoccupied with Roundface suddenly hurling at her feet. He quickly gathered her bangs in his hands and pulled her hair back from her face, rubbing circles between her shoulder blades. "You think you need to see recovery, girl?" Once she'd emptied her stomach, Roundface nodded weakly, before outright fainting. Katsuki caught her before she landed in the pile of vomit on the floor, quickly sweeping her up in a bridal carry. He barely spared a glance at the other two before running down the stairs, taking off down the street towards the tunnel out of Ground Beta. Izuku hummed worriedly as Katsuki beelined out of the building and towards the exit of Ground Beta. "Yikes, I know getting hit in the solar plexus is unpleasant, but I didn't think it'd induce vomiting that badly. Ashido winced. I talked to Uraraka a little bit after the quirk apprehension test yesterday, and she told me that floating too much stuff makes her nauseous, especially if she floats a living thing. Since she was already floating the bomb, adding Aoyama onto that was already pushing her to the edge. Izuku sucked in a breath through his teeth. Youch. I hope she's okay. Katsuki showed up at the monitor room only a few seconds after Ajiro had dragged Aoyama in. The French blonde was practically catatonic, clutching his glittery cape and sobbing uncontrollably. Katsuki rolled his eyes and walked past Aoyama with a grunt. Get over yourself, it's just a cape. Easily cleaned, easily repaired. Human lives are less so. All Might boomed. An impressive display on both sides, albeit brief. In the interest of time, I'll only ask for a short critique of the overall match. Any takers? Yayurazu raised her hand, but Izuku spoke first. Ajiro and Uraraka had a good plan in place. Floating the bomb made it unlikely for the hero team to properly secure it without facing her first. In addition, Ojiro took the fight to the hero team, stalling them as much as possible. But he also knew when he was outmatched. When he saw that he couldn't beat Bakugo, he made a strategic retreat and attempted to fight the heroes alongside his partner. And because one of the heroes was an active hindrance, here he glared sharply at Aoyama, the villain team could have won if Bakugo hadn't accidentally exploited Uraraka's weakness. All Might grinned. Well said, young Midoriya. There was a rush of wind, and suddenly the pro was at the door. Now, watch how a pro exits like he's got somewhere to be. In an instant, the hero was gone, and an enormous gust of wind signified that he had bolted towards the exit tunnel at top speed. Gasps and shocked muttering were heard, but Izuku ignored it to lay a hand on Katsuki's shoulder. She's gonna be okay. You got her to Recovery Girl as soon as you could. The blonde sighed. I know, but I did that to her in the first place. Izuku cuffed him over the head. You didn't know for certain it'd cause such a violent reaction. Hell, I didn't know it would, and Ishido had to explain to me why it did. Katsuki's shoulders slumped in defeat. Fine, whatever. Izuku patted him on the back. Hey, don't worry about it. We're here to learn, to get better. In future combat exercises, you'll know not to hit her in that spot, and it won't happen again, right? Katsuki stood upright. Right. Izuku grinned. A taboy. After classes were done for the day, Katsuki made to head towards the front entrance, but paused when Izuku started heading the other direction, flanked by the wisps. After a brief moment of indecision, the blonde turned on his heel, quickly catching up. Where are you headed? Izuku grunted. Support department. My costume designer left a note in my costume case asking me to stop by after classes today to discuss additional gear. Katsuki raised an eyebrow. And you're considering it? Last time I checked, your wisps covered just about every necessary angle. Izuku sighed. Not quite. I've still got one major weak point exposed: the wisps themselves. Katsuki blinked. I don't follow. As powerful as they are, they're still sentient beings, and they've still got blind spots. Since I can only have one fused at a time, that means the other 7 are completely exposed during a fight. And sure, they're fast, but they're not invincible. I keep worrying about what might happen if one of them was caught unawares and seriously injured, or worse. Katsuki hummed. Yeah, that's fair. If you had something that they could sit inside until they're needed, that would be cool, but it'd also be super bulky and tough to keep on hand in the field. Izuku grunted. Don't be too certain. Support items have been getting more and more compact in recent years. There were rapid footsteps behind them, and they paused, turning to see Uraraka running up to them. There you guys are. Ashido told me you were heading in this direction, and I wanted to catch you before you left. Katsuki raised an eyebrow. How come? She grinned sheepishly and rubbed at the back of her neck, Well, mostly to apologize for earlier. Katsuki blinked. Apologize? Why? You did nothing wrong. But I ruined the match. Katsuki scoffed. Cheeks. You did everything you were supposed to in that situation. If anything, I should be apologizing to you for making you vomit your guts out. She gasped. I don't blame you for that. It was a combat exercise. We're supposed to hit each other. I already know I've got to get over my nausea, and I'm going to have to endure pain, so I might as well start now. Izuku pinched the bridge of his nose. All right. Clearly, neither of you blames the other for what happened during the exercise, so just shake hands, promise to do better, and move on, okay? The two others stared at him. After a couple seconds, Katsuki sighed and stuck his hand out. He's got a point. We both have things to work on, so let's just move on. Uraraka smiled and accepted the handshake. Fair enough. Izuku grunted and continued down the hall. Katsuki followed, and after a brief pause, Uraraka fell into step on Izuku's other side. So, how come you two are going this way? I thought the front entrance was the other direction from the classroom. Izuku grunted again. Support department. My costume designer wanted to talk to me. Uraraka blinked. Wait, we can talk to our costume designers. Katsuki tilted his head. Yeah, didn't you read the memos that were in the cases? Hero students can go to the support labs after classes to propose costume alterations and discuss additional gear. Why? She blushed. Well, I had thought I'd just get used to the heels in my costume, but if we're allowed to request alterations, I'm gonna see if I can switch them out for something like astronaut boots. Katsuki grunted. Yeah, that's definitely something to talk to your costume designer about. If your costume isn't comfortable, change it. Not that complicated. They rounded a corner, and Izuku grunted upon seeing the huge metal double doors further down the hallway. There's the development studio. It's the workshop dedicated to costume adjustments. He stepped up to the doors and reached for the handle, when an explosion suddenly blasted him across the hall, blowing the doors off their hinges entirely. Loud cackling emanated from inside, and an older voice shouted, Hatsum, I swear to Nedzu, if you don't move your projects to the beta studio, I'm going to ban you from the workshops for a whole week. The first voice groaned, But sir, I'm meeting someone here today, and I couldn't just do nothing while I waited. Izuku sighed as he peeled himself off the wall. I'm guessing she means me. He snapped his fingers, and orange shot through the smoke, quickly dispersing it. I take it you're my costume designer. The girl with pink dreadlocks beamed at him. Maybe. Hatsum Mei, future CEO of Hatsum Industries. Which costume is yours, again? Izuku grunted. Midoriya Izuku, the rainbow one. Hatsum brightened. Oh, you're the guy I wanted to talk to today. Honestly, your class has a criminal lack of babies with their costumes. Wire's the only one who got to include some Nido grenade gauntlets with one of hers. Katsuki scowled. You mean the functional weapons that definitely shouldn't have been given to a hero student on the first day of classes? Power Loader waved a hand dismissively. Don't worry, I made sure she added a toggle. If you slip on the pin coverings upside down, the tanks won't siphon your sweat. Wasn't there a note in your case about that? Katsuki frowned. Not that I saw. Then again, I saw two gauntlets that looked exactly like what I'd requested, and I kinda assumed they were fully functional, so I just left 'em in there. Good to know they've got an off switch. Hatsum rolled her eyes. Boring. What's the point of having babies if you're not gonna use them? Power Loader sighed and opened his mouth to say something, but Katsuki beat him to it. If you give a first-year student the equivalent of a handheld nuke on the first day, there's a good chance they'd accidentally kill someone with it. We've got to learn control before we start messing with weaponry, or people are gonna get hurt. Got it? Hatsum paused, then nodded emphatically. Got it. Wait on the babies until the user's trained to operate them. Power Loader gave Katsuki an extremely grateful look, before adding, "Of course, that's specifically for weapons. For mobility aids like your hover souls, those are more applicable for early on." Uraraka perked up. "Hover souls? Those sound interesting." "What?" Hatsum held a hand up. Bup. I've got a meeting. You and I can talk later, but right now, I have a client to negotiate with." The support student grabbed Izuku by the wrist and dragged him over to an empty testing room, pulling him inside and closing the door before whirling to face him with stars in her eyes. Before she could say anything, Izuku held up a hand. "Keep it slow enough that I can register what you're saying, all right?" She nodded quickly. "Sure, I can do that." Izuku crossed his arms. "All right, what's on your mind?" Hatsum grinned. "So, Majima-sensei let us watch the footage of the entrance exam for our assigned clients, and I noticed that your buddies kept flying around loose, which doesn't seem safe for them." Izuku grunted. "True. I was actually hoping to discuss some kind of housing for them so they aren't vulnerable mid-fight." Hatsum beamed. "That's what I was thinking, so I went ahead and whipped up a quick prototype baby that I wanted to test, but couldn't without something from you." She ran to a corner of the room and slid open a drawer, pulling out a weird-looking device. It had a flat cylindrical base made of red plastic, with two small clamps underneath a clear plastic lid that was hinged on one side and fastened on the other. "Here, if my hypothesis is correct, the final piece should allow this baby to safely contain a single wisp." Izuku raised an eyebrow. "And what final piece would that be?" She grinned. "Some of your hair, duh," Izuku blinked, and she rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on, it's obvious. Your hair is normally prismatic, and it changes color when you fuse with a wisp, so clearly they're being stored in your hair in some way." Izuku raised a finger, then paused, finding that he didn't really have a counterpoint to that. "Okay, that's fair." He reached behind his head and pulled out a few strands of hair, noting that it seemed to glow even in the dim lighting of the room. "That good enough?" Hatsum beamed and snagged the hairs from his grip, immediately opening the device and slotting them into the clamps. "That should do it. Now, which one wants to be the guinea pig?" The wisps exchanged glances, and Blue cautiously tapped a nub against the exposed hairs. There was a flash of light, and Hatsum snapped the lid shut, revealing that the hairs within were now a brilliant blue. She cackled maniacally, but Izuku wasn't convinced, holding his hand out. Taking the hint, she handed him the device, and he flicked the lid open. There was another flash, and Blue backflipped into the air, his eyes spinning. "Whoa, that was weird." Green floated closer, rubbing her front nubs together worriedly. "Are you all right?" Blue shook his head, his eyes refocusing. Yeah, I think I'm okay. It's just really weird to fuse with something that's not alive." Izuku grinned and locked eyes with Hatsum. "Works like a charm." She grinned widely. "Excellent. I'll get right on machining 7 more of those babies. I noticed there's a lot of empty room on the back of your costume, so I figure I can stick 'em there." Izuku rubbed at his chin. "Actually, I want to check something." He pointed at the curved side of the lid. "Could you drill a small hole through there? Just enough that the hairs would fit through." Hatsum nodded and dashed out of the room, quickly coming back in with a small drill bit. She quickly bored a hole in the side of the lid, and Izuku adjusted the hairs in the clamps so that the ends were sticking out. Red fused with the hair, and Izuku laid the container on his palm, making sure the tips were touching his skin. He mentally prodded it, and there was another red flash, leaving the detached hairs prismatic. Izuku glanced up, and sure enough, his own locks were now red. Another mental push, and the clamped hairs turned red again. A fourth flash, and red floated up to join the others, rubbing his head with one of his tentacles. Izuku nodded in satisfaction. "Figured. If the hair is touching my skin, the wisp can move from the container to my body without exposing itself. So, if I give you some more hairs, Could you wire these containers into the costume so that the hairs are touching my skin? Hatsune cackled and snatched the container from his hand. Child's play, Captain Rainbow. Just watch. You'll have an epic new costume before your heroics exercise tomorrow. Izuku rounded the corner before Yua and paused, Katsuki running into him due to the sudden stop. What's up? Izuku grunted and gestured to the crowd milling around the front gate. Reporters. Katsuki groaned and shouldered his bag. Wonderful. All right, let's get this over with. They walked towards the school, the cries of the reporters growing louder and clearer as they approached. As they watched, a Gen Ed student attempted to push through the crowd and was surrounded immediately with microphones and cameras being shoved in his face. Hey, you, All Might's teaching here, right? What's he like as a teacher? Is it true he always smiles, even while talking? What subject is he teaching? Which costume does he wear? Or is he in civilian clothing? What does his breath smell like? Wordlessly, the student gestured to the shoulders of his uniform, 2 buttons set on each side. The closest reporter groaned and turned on her heel, announcing, "This kid's in Gen Ed, he's got nothing." She walked up close to the gate and shouted, "Come on, give us All Might already." The crowd moved in behind her, inadvertently shoving the Gen Ed kid back away from the gate. Izuku and Katsuki walked up as the purple-haired teen gave the reporters a dirty look. Izuku tapped him on the shoulder with a worried expression. "You okay?" In lieu of an answer, the kid gave a thumbs up. Izuku frowned, taking in the dead expression and eye bags that gave Aizawa-senseis a run for their money. "You don't look like it. Having trouble sleeping?" A nod. Izuku winced. "Yeah, I know what that's like." He pointed over his shoulder with his thumb at where Yellow was flying rings around the other wisps. "I gotta make sure to let that one exercise before bed, otherwise he keeps me up all night." The Gen Ed guy gave him a sympathetic look and stuck his hand out. Shinsu Hitoshi, 1C. Izuku accepted the handshake. Midoriya Izuku, 1A. Katsuki grunted. Bakugo Katsuki, also 1A. "Now, how are we going to get to classes? Those damn reporters are blocking the entrance." Shinsu raised an eyebrow. "Hero students wanting to avoid the cameras? That's a shocker." Izuku grunted, ignoring Shinsu's comment. "I'm tempted to cause a diversion with red down the block and cite Sentient Quirk legislation as an excuse. Technically, I have a provisional civilian license so that the wisps can exist and exercise without breaking quirk usage laws. But I don't want to risk causing property damage." Katsuki hummed, considering the crowd. "Cyan, maybe? Dart each of us through one by one." Shinsu coughed. "And what about me?" Katsuki raised an eyebrow at the insomniac. "Did you think you weren't included in that us?" Shinsu blinked. "Kinda." Izuku hummed, considering the reporters and glancing at Cyan. My civilian license doesn't cover the fusing." There was a cough behind them, and the 3 of them turned to see Ida standing there. "If I might interrupt, while it's not well known, there's a side entrance about a block down from here. You just need to scan your ID card to open it. Midoriya, if you keep your wisps in your bag, they should be let through with you." Izuku nodded gratefully. "Thanks for the tip, Ida." The taller boy waved his hand dismissively. "Think nothing of it. Because of my brother's career, I've had to deal with reporters myself on occasion, and believe me, they're extremely unpleasant." When the bell rang to signal the start of homeroom, Aizawa-sensei walked in with a supremely annoyed look on his face. Wisely, everyone shut up, and he huffed as he stepped up to the podium. "Good thinking. Reading the room is an important skill for anyone, not just heroes. In any case, today you'll need to make a decision that'll impact the rest of your time here at UA." Nobody dared to breathe. "You'll need to decide on a class representative." There was a collective sigh of relief before everyone began clamoring to be chosen. Blue whimpered and ducked inside Izuku's bag, and Green followed her fellow wisp. The others congregated in the rafters, away from the din, and Izuku wished he could join them. After a little while, Ida shot up and shouted, "Everyone, since we clearly cannot come to a consensus, we must decide this rationally. We will hold a democratic vote to choose our class representative." Kaminari frowned. "We've only known each other for a couple of days. Wouldn't everyone just vote for themselves?" Perhaps. However, if someone were to gain others' votes in such a short time, then clearly they are most suited for the position. He turned to where Aizawa-sensei was slumped against the front wall. "Is this acceptable, sensei?" "I don't care. Just get it done by the end of homeroom." Ida nodded and reached under the podium, producing a stack of papers and a bundle of pencils. He distributed the items among the class, and the room was quickly filled with the sound of scribbling. Izuku tapped the eraser of his pencil against his chin, deep in thought. "I'm not going to lie and say that I don't want the position. But do I think I'm the best person for it? Ida already takes charge first out of everyone, and he certainly has the confidence for it. Yaoyorozu is really smart, and she could have won the exercise if Koda hadn't used a tidal wave of rats. But she doesn't seem to believe in herself. Ida would probably fill the position best. Maybe I'm sacrificing my chances, but sacrifice is a hero's job, isn't it?" He quickly wrote Ida's name on his paper and turned it over, setting his pencil down on his desk. Once everyone's paper was turned over, Ida went around the room and collected the votes, making sure not to look at them until the stack reached the podium and he began sorting them into piles. Once the votes were tallied, Ida grabbed a piece of chalk from the tray and wrote the results on the board. Midoriya Izuku 7 votes. Ida Tenya 6 votes. Katsuki Bakugo 3 votes. Yaoyorozu Momo 2 votes. Aoyama Yuga 1 vote. Maita Minoru 1 vote. Katsuki grunted. "3 of you idiots voted for me? You seriously thought the guy with anger issues should lead the class?" Kirishima shrugged. "I dunno, bro. You seem like you've got a good head on your shoulders." Uraraka nodded. "I second that. You're calmer than you give yourself credit for." Ojiro hummed. "Agreed." Aoyama pouted. "But messieurs and madams, should the face of this class not be Trez Sparkly? Surely I am the superior choice." Ashido snorted. "Dude, if you were in charge of the class, you'd have us all covered in glitter and eating camembert with every meal." Aoyama bristled. "And what is wrong with camembert?" Izuku clapped his hands together, silencing everyone. "As your newly appointed class representative, kindly shut up." He walked up to the podium, nodding at Ida before scanning the class. "I'm not entirely certain why you all apparently think I'm good for this role, but I'll do my best to live up to your expectations." He turned and offered a hand to Ida. "I look forward to working with you, Vice Representative." Ida smiled and accepted the handshake. "Likewise." Aizawa-sensei grunted and sat upright. "Good, you got it over with during the span of homeroom. Certainly faster than other classes I've had in the past." Izuku and Ida quickly headed for their seats, and the hero emerged from his sleeping bag, moving to stand behind the podium. "Right. In other announcements, I've been informed that some of you requested minor alterations to your costumes yesterday after classes." The man nodded in approval. "Good thinking. Your costume is an ever-present part of your career, so it needs to be in top condition, just like you. Making sure you can wear it comfortably is a vital step. Midoriya, I'm told that your updates are taking longer than expected, but Power Loader assures me your costume will be available by tomorrow's Foundational Heroics class. Uraraka, your updates are already finished, so I recommend stopping by the development studio after classes today to make sure everything is comfortable and in working order. Yaoyorozu, your request for an alternate costume has been received by the designated company, and it should be ready by next week." Maita pouted. "Why? It's already perfect." The midget suddenly reeled back in his seat as Cyan practically teleported in front of him, staring him down resolutely. At the same time, Aizawa-sensei fixed the short boy with a sharp glare. Make another comment like that, and you're expelled. Mineta whimpered and nodded, and the teacher grunted. Hagakure, you've been specifically requested to come down to the development studio after classes today. Power Loader noticed the schematics for your costume and insisted that you needed something else. He quickly fixed Mineta with another glare before the midget could say anything. Also, a quick word about yesterday's exercise. For those of you who won, don't think you don't still have room to improve from where you are. Likewise, for those of you who lost, don't think that your failures you're here to learn, and losing is a part of that. The bell rang, and the hero grabbed his sleeping bag. Be back here at 1 to elect class officers. That's all for today. Dismissed. At lunchtime, Izuku and Katsuki sat at the same table as Uraraka, Ida, and Takoyami, but this time they were joined by Yaoyorozu and Todoroki, the latter by virtue of following behind the former. Not long after she sat down, Yaoyorozu turned to Izuku and said, I feel I must congratulate you on being chosen as class representative, Midoriya-kun. Izuku grunted. Not like I did much in the way of campaigning or anything. Still not entirely sure I'm the best person for the job. Ida huffed. Well, I'm certain you'll do quite well, Midoriya. You've already shown an ability to make snap decisions, and you've routinely placed other people before yourself, qualities that I unfortunately lack. Still, I feel proud that the class considers me a close second to you. Katsuki scoffed. Still can't believe people thought I should be a rep. I've never been good at all that paperwork. Plus, can you imagine people seeing me and assuming that the whole class is the same? Uraraka sighed. I guess that's fair. Todoroki hummed. By the way, Midoriya, your quirk is unusual. Not only is it sentient, which is already rare, but it's incredibly multifaceted. It's almost like 8 separate quirks rather than a single one. Izuku snorted. Trust me, I'm well aware my quirk is a drastic outlier when it comes to what we know about them. But we got it tested shortly after it manifested, and we're certain it's just the one. Todoroki frowned. Be that as it may, it's quite powerful. Tell me, Midoriya, are you the secret love child of Gang Orca and Spectrum? Izuku choked on his noodles, and Katsuki quickly pulled him out of his seat for a Heimlich maneuver. After a few seconds of coughing, during which Todoroki was as stone-faced as ever, Izuku finally recovered enough to stare at the other teen incredulously. Are you joking? You've got to be joking. Where the hell did you get that idea? Todoroki shrugged. Gang Orca has an aquatic quirk, and Spectrum can create multicolored beams of light. Both very strong quirks, and could reasonably combine to create yours. Izuku blinked, then sat down and sighed deeply, pinching the bridge of his nose. Okay. So, first off, the wisps aren't actually squids, they just share some physical similarities with real squids. As far as I know, they aren't aquatic, although Yellow does have a weird fascination with water. And second, my parents aren't heroes, not by a long shot. Mom works as a nurse at Musutafu General Hospital, and Dad's in hero merchandising in America has been since I was 2. Mom's quirk lets her attract small objects, and Dad has fire breath. I'm told I take after his brother, Midoriya Tako, who has a Kraken quirk. Supposedly, the Midoriya family has a lot of quirks based on mythical creatures. Todoroki sat up straighter. Are you related to Ryukyu? Izuku opened his mouth to retort, then paused. Let me get back to you on that. I don't think so, but I'm not 100% certain about that. Suddenly, alarms started blaring, and they all glanced up. The speakers blared. There has been a level 3 security breach. All students please evacuate outside promptly. I repeat, there has been a level 3 security breach. All students please evacuate outside promptly. Immediately, all the students in the cafeteria got up and began stampeding towards the exit. Izuku stuck 2 fingers in his mouth and let out a piercing whistle, fusing with green and floating above the heads of the crowd. He soared through the thankfully spacious hallways, scanning the tide of students. Spotting a head of blue hair, he snapped his fingers, and pink flew in after orange, the two working in tandem to fling Ida up to the ceiling and stick him there by his feet. Izuku glanced over to the windows and swore under his breath, spying microphones and cameras inside the campus boundaries. It's just the media. We need to get them to calm down. Ida pointed down the hallway at the double doors. If you can get me onto the door jamb, I should be able to get their attention. Izuku nodded. I'll distract them using red, and you get their attention while they're not panicking. Cyan, you're up. The wisp nodded, and Ida shot through the air as a beam of light, reforming above the doors and planting his feet on the frame. Izuku flew to the side and landed on a windowsill, exchanging green for red and accentuating a clap of his hands with a burst of fire. It had the intended effect of making the crowd pause. Ida shouted, "Everyone, please calm down. It is just the media. Acting in such a panicked manner is unbefitting of students at such a prestigious institution. Now, please proceed through the exit in a calm and orderly fashion." The crowd began to slowly move through the doors, a steady trickle of people emptying the hallway. Izuku nodded in satisfaction and dropped to the floor, joining the flow and barely even reacting when Ida dropped down next to him. "Good work, Vice Rep." Ida slightly bowed his head. "I could not have done it without you, class representative." One reconvened in the classroom at 1 o'clock as expected, though they were quieter than they'd been that morning. Before anyone could say anything, Aizawa-sensei stepped up to the podium. "Now, first things first. While I'd like to say I'm disappointed in you all for getting caught up in the panic earlier, it's understandable that you'd follow the older students. Regardless, in future crises, I expect you to handle yourselves much more calmly than today. Midoriya and Ida set a good example, try to follow it. That's all from me. Class Rep, Vice Rep, your turn." Izuku nodded and walked up to the podium, Ida standing beside him shortly after. "Right. First, we need a secretary to handle paperwork and other managerial-type duties. I can't think of anyone off the top of my head, though." "Vice Rep?" Ida hummed. "I nominate Yayurazu for the position. She's quite adept at organization, scheduling, and similar duties." The others in the class voiced their assent, and Izuku nodded. "All right, then Yayurazu is secretary. Next, the treasurer, for budgeting and allocation of resources. I nominate Uraraka. Her family does construction, which consists of a lot of that sort of work. Objections?" Minta scoffed. "I bet she'll just take whatever money she can from the budget and sneak it off for herself." Izuku leveled the midget with a glare. "Your opinion has been noted and steadfastly ignored. Any thoughts, Ida?" Ida shook his head. "I have no objections." Izuku grunted, keeping his gaze locked on Minta as the rest of the class nodded in agreement. Then it's settled. Lastly, we need a discipline officer, someone to keep troublemakers in line. I propose we give that position to Bakugo. He's already done that sort of thing before, and he's an excellent mischief deterrent." Ida nodded. Seconded. Katsuki swiveled in his seat to shoot Minta an evil grin, curling his left hand into a claw. The midget whimpered and shrank low in his seat, and several in the class shot Katsuki grateful looks. Izuku chuckled before clapping his hands together. "Right? That concludes the election of class officers, though other positions may be created if they are deemed necessary and approved by Aizawa-sensei." The teacher grunted. "Fine by me." The following day, the front gate had been replaced with a solid sheet of metal, and several of Ectoplasm's clones were directing students to a side gate, much like the entrance Ida had shown them the day before. The crowd of reporters was thankfully nowhere to be seen, and Aizawa-sensei informed them of a class field trip that afternoon. "Be at the bus lot at 3:20 p.m., or get left behind. Wear your hero costumes or don't. It's up to you." At lunchtime, rather than sitting with 1A again, Izuku grabbed 2 bentos from Lunch Rush and led Ida through U.S. halls to the first class representative meeting. Aizawa-sensei, Vlad King, Present Mike, Ectoplasm, an underground hero called Ventriloquist, Power Loader, Midnight, and a minor hero by the name of Sprout were already there. Izuku and Ida were the first students to arrive, and they were quickly joined by the other class reps and vice reps of the first-year courses. 1B was represented by Kendo Itsuka and Shouta Nyanjeki. 1C's class rep was a girl with curly white hair by the name of Kuki Shizuka, and Shinsu was their vice rep. 1D was represented by Zunuyamu, a girl with a ginger ponytail and 2 white hearing aids, and Agoyamato Tsutsutaka, a boy with a black pompadour and a prominent chin. 1E had Tojike Chikuchi, a girl with a black ponytail and spiked hair tie, and Tenohira Shizukesa, a boy with gray hair with soundwave decals. 1F's class rep was Kinzoku Majiru, a girl with silvery, shoulder-length hair. 1G was represented by Arashi Harigane, a boy with light blue hair that was constantly crackling with electricity. 1H had Furasu Meina, a girl with a black ponytail, a screwdriver-themed headband, and an exhausted expression to rival Shinsu's own. Representing 1I was Atama Hachai, a boy with tall blonde hair like a beehive. Rikai Sokudo, a boy with short olive hair and round glasses, represented Class 1J. Finally, 1K's representative was Memai Hanton, a boy with dark blue hair and swirls on his cheeks. Power Loader explained the support and management courses only had singular representatives due to the specialized nature and smaller sizes of the classes. The homeroom teachers for the management course were absent for the first meeting due to an unexpected surge in workload. Izuku guessed that the media invasion was responsible. Once introductions had finished, a vent in the ceiling opened up, and a furry figure in a suit and tie dropped out of the air duct, landing in a chair at the head of the room. Calmly ignoring the shocked screaming of the Gen Ed reps, the mammal chirped, "Greetings, everyone. I'm certain most of you recognize me from orientation, but I imagine one has yet to see me in the flesh or the fur, as the case may be." Izuku bowed his head. "Principal Nedzu." Nedzu chuckled. "Please, a simple Nedzu-sensei will suffice. I see myself as a teacher more than a principal, personally." Izuku smirked. "Nedzu-sensei, then." Nedzu grinned and clasped his paws together as the Gen Ed reps finally composed themselves. Now, this first meeting is more of an introduction to each other. After all, as representatives, you'll be working with each other quite often, so it's important to be familiar. Furasu sighed. "As long as I'm away from Hatsune." Izuku chuckled. "Yeah, I'm guessing she can be a handful." Nedzu beamed. "And that right there is what I had intended for this first meeting. While you may be in separate courses or separate classes, you are students of UA all the same, and having good relationships with your peers is essential to your development. I sincerely hope that at least some of you leave this meeting with a greater rapport with others than you had when you arrived. There's no real schedule, so feel free to take the lead of the discussion, anyone." Tojike huffed. "I personally don't see interdepartmental relations becoming a thing. Sure, it'd be nice, but I doubt it's realistic." Izuku hummed. "Well, it depends on how open both sides are to getting chummy. If I had to hazard a guess, Tojike-san, you're expecting that the hero course will largely keep to themselves. Am I right?" Tojike shrugged. "Kinda figured you big shots wouldn't have time for us little people." Ida bristled. "On the contrary, making time for the little people, as you so put it, is a principal responsibility of heroes." Kendo nodded. "Heroes are, above all else, public servants, and we can't serve the public if we don't understand the public." Several noises of assent rose up, and she glanced around the room. "So, any suggestions on how to promote interactions between the departments?" Shinsu cautiously raised his hand. "Well, some students in Gen Ed tried out for the hero course, but couldn't quite make it in due to having non-combative quirks. Some of us really want to be heroes, and while we could transfer by making a good showing in the sports festival, the fact remains that the hero course is getting exclusive training." They're shooting even further ahead and leaving everyone else in the dust. Izuku rubbed at his chin. Gym Alpha is open to all courses after school hours until 6:30 p.m., and I'm pretty sure Gym Beta is the same. I know Hero course students can't join clubs, since those run during our extra school period, but is there anything against training sessions after hours? Nedzu chuckled. On the contrary, Midoriya-kun, all students are heavily encouraged to make full use of US facilities. Izuku nodded and locked eyes with Shinsu. Alright, so, what if we set up regular training sessions between Hero and Gen Ed students? It's not the same as heroics classes, but it's still more than what they'd get normally. Shinsu nodded. Sounds good to me. He glanced at the other Gen Ed reps. That sound good to you guys? Tenohira frowned. While getting extra physical training alongside Hero kids is all well and good for transfer hopefuls, what about something for the Gen Ed kids that want to stick to Gen Ed? Shouter raised his hand. What about a standing invitation for tutoring from the top scorers in the various departments? I knew some people back in junior high that became really close after studying for exams together. Tenohira nodded. That could work. Granted, we won't know who the top scorers are for a little while, but we'll get there when we get there. The only snag would be getting them to volunteer. Izuku shrugged. Well, that's a flaw in anything we come up with. No matter how much we advertise it, the choice to make use of it is still up to the other students. We can't force them to be buddy-buddy with each other, and some will insist on antagonism. Kendu groaned. Don't I know it? One of my classmates has spent every spare moment proclaiming that 1B is the superior hero class. And worse, I think some others are starting to side with him that we need to prove something. Izuku sighed. There'll always be people like that. Least we can do is try to show that they're the minority. But let's not worry about that right now. So far, we've only talked about Hero and Gen Ed. How could we foster relations with the support or management departments? Furasu hummed. I know that the Hero and support courses are already closer than usual, since Hero students tend to interact with their costume designers a lot, so we probably don't need to worry on that front. But beyond that, things might get difficult. Us nerds generally don't do well with socializing. A lot of us are introverts, and some are workaholics. Plus, I think a good chunk of us have had to deal with people offering friendship, only to turn around and make fun of us behind our backs. Izuku winced. Not a great feeling. Even worse is when they act like they want to be friends, when really they only want to use their connection to you to get somewhere else. Arashi hummed. That's true, but back on topic, what can we do? A thought occurred to Izuku. Say, the support students often have to market themselves to developers and companies in hopes of getting contracted out for gear and such, right? Kinzoku nodded. Yeah, granted, we don't get a lot of that outside of the school festival, but a few enterprising kids will make themselves known during the sports festival. Izuku nodded. Right, and management students often create projections of a hero student's early career or manage social media accounts for said students, right? Memai nodded slowly. Yeah, where are you going with this? Izuku laced his hands together on top of the conference table. What I'm thinking is, we offer support students and management students a chance to coordinate the latter will advertise the former. It could be an extra credit assignment, an after-school club, an optional side project, etc. I'm not certain how we'd present it so that it's less like a business proposal and more like an offer of cooperation. Here he grinned at the management students, but I'm certain you guys could figure that out. Atama huffed and ran a hand up his hairdo. Of course we could, 'tis our role in the world, after all. Zunu piped up, and while management classes generally focus on the hero side of things, maybe there could be opportunities for practice with more mundane businesses aligned with general education. Say, working cybersecurity for a popular streamer or advertising for a new chain of restaurants. Rikai grinned and pushed his glasses up his nose. Indeed, I know some of my classmates have been put out that they keep getting slapped in the face with the fact that they are simple hype men, as they put it. Perhaps a break from the hero industry would be quite welcome. Arashi frowned and rubbed at his chin. I'm not sure how we could get support and Gen Ed to overlap, though. It's not like civilians get a lot of gear, or even need it in the first place. Kuki interjected. Maybe, but consider optional side assignments where a Gen Ed student shares a daily issue with a support student, and the support kid tries to come up with a technical solution to the problem. For example, say someone has chronic insomnia as a result of their quirk. Maybe the support student could develop a speaker that outputs a frequency that induces drowsiness. After all, as big a business as heroics is, it's not everything. Plus, science has stagnated hard since quirks developed, so maybe some of your classmates would be excited about getting that started up again. Kinzuku hummed. I know one of my classmates has had ideas for new fields of nutrition, but the assignments haven't really let her work in that direction. Last I heard, she was thinking up some kind of granola bar that's the nutritional equivalent of a full meal. Aizawa-sensei stood up straighter from where he was leaning against the wall. Say what now? Nedzu coughed into his paw and tapped at his wristwatch. As exciting as these conversations have been, I must sadly remind you all that we're running low on time. Still, what I heard discussed was interesting, and I'd love to hear you go into these in further detail. Perhaps we should establish communications between all of you, so that these topics can be brought up later in more detail. Izuku held up his phone, open to a newly made Discord server titled Congregation of the Rat God. Already on it, sir. You should be able to invite the relevant teachers and grant yourself admin privileges. He quickly switched over to his Notes app, making a new note titled Rep Contact Info. He passed his phone to Ida and said, Add your phone numbers, email addresses, Discord accounts, or anything else we can use to contact you. I'll be sure to make everyone's relevant info easily available from the server. I've already included mine there. Nedzu chuckled, already tapping away at his tablet. Excellent work, Midoriya-kun. When the bell rang to signal the end of 6th period, most of the class was up and out the door before Recovery Girl even shut her binder. She sighed and slid her materials into her handbag, slinging it over her shoulder and heading for the classroom door. You kids and your boundless energy. Izuku snorted from where he was desperately trying to cram yellow into his bag. Don't I know it? The class was gathered by the bus lot at 3:15, and Aizawa-sensei grunted in approval upon seeing everyone in their costumes. Good thinking. A hero needs to be ready to act at a moment's notice. Since everyone's here, go ahead and get on. Ida cleared his throat, likely intending to organize the class onto the bus, but Izuku laid a cautious hand on the taller boy's shoulder. And indeed, the bus has a non-traditional seating layout. Based on how Ida's shoulders slumped, the vice rep hadn't expected it. Thankfully, the class loaded up quickly and orderly, and soon the bus was rumbling across the massive campus. The front featured 4 seats on each side, much like a train car. Behind the middle entrances, the layout was closer to that of a traditional bus. Ida had taken the seat closest to the front on the driver's side, and Izuku sat across the aisle. Ashido, Aoyama, and Kaminari sat next to Ida, and Izuku was joined by Satu, Tsu, and Kirishima. Not long into the trip, Tsu leaned forward to look at Izuku. Midoriya-kun. Kiro, I say what's on my mind a lot. What's up with your quirk, Kiro? It's got so many moving parts, it's hard to believe that it's a single quirk. Izuku hummed. I get what you mean, Tsu, but Mom and I had it tested thoroughly when I was a kid, and we're certain it's just a rarely multifaceted quirk. I just hit the genetic jackpot. Kirishima grunted. I guess so. Your quirk's super flashy, so you'll have no trouble getting noticed as a pro. He held up his arm and hardened it with a shower of sparks. My own hardening is strong, sure, but it doesn't look like much, so I doubt I'll be very popular. Izuku huffed. Don't sell yourself short. That level of defensive capability is something most pros wish they had. It'll get you far. Aoyama laid a hand over his heart and boasted. Ah, but Mon Naval Laser is pro-level in both flashiness and strength. In unison, Izuku and Ashido deadpanned. Yeah, until your stomach gives out. The French blonde pouted, and Kirishima chuckled. Still, if you want to talk both flashy and strong, nobody can beat Bakugo or Todoroki. The latter was asleep, and the former snorted loudly. And that's where you're wrong. I still have yet to actually kick the nerd in a sparring session. The only reason why I was at the top of my class so consistently was that I barely had any competition. The nerd was the only one who made me work for it. Izuku snorted. He calls me a nerd when he refuses to stay up past sunset and complains if he ever gets below a 93 on an assignment. Pot, meet kettle. Uraraka giggled. Does he really? Izuku grinned. I'll send you his phone logs. 0 activity after 8 p.m. for the past 3 years. She started cackling madly, and Katsuki's eye twitched. Oh, yeah? Well, how about I show quoth the raven your internet search history? Tokoyami perked up. You have my attention. Katsuki grinned, eyes locked with Izuku. The 6 most recent results are all searches for hero articles. Izuku bristled. Hey, if you were as serious about heroes as I am, you'd be keeping up with the news, too. Katsuki raised an eyebrow. Since when could Maruko crack a person's skull between her legs like a watermelon have anything to do with hero work? And don't get me started on that tool clamp you bought. Izuku blushed furiously and pulled his hood over his head, almost the entire bus laughing. Kaminari, meanwhile, locked eyes with him and nodded sagely. A fellow degenerate of culture, I see. Izuku mumbled. I wanted to figure out if I could use blue to survive a Lunatidra's. But no, Mom had to ban me from putting my head in a vise. Kaminari leaned across the aisle and laid a hand on Izuku's shoulder. From one man to another, I salute your attempt at sacrificing yourself in the name of science. At the front of the bus, Aizawa-sensei sighed deeply. Just barely loud enough to hear, he muttered, I chose to work with teenagers. He turned around and announced, Enough chatter, we're almost there. Uraraka nearly vibrated to a higher plane of existence when she saw the figure standing in front of the enormous glass dome. Oh my god, it's the space hero, 13. She's my favorite. She's my entire inspiration for going into rescue heroics. Izuku grinned and laid a hand on his classmate's shoulder. Easy, girl. Wait until after class before you ask for an autograph. Katsuki raised an eyebrow and grinned at Izuku. After you do the same, right? Izuku rolled his eyes. Don't put words in my mouth. 13 bowed. Welcome, Class 1A. I've been eagerly waiting for you. Come, let's head inside. The huge double doors slid open, and Izuku couldn't help but gape at the interior of the massive building. The doors opened onto a raised platform, with a long set of stairs heading down to a plaza below. Immediately to the left was an assortment of wrecked buildings, and to the right was a smaller dome with opaque shades of blue. After the wrecked buildings on the left, there was a massive landslide, followed by a small mountain range. Next to the blue dome, there was a massive lake with a green slide, followed by another opaque dome with a flame pattern. In the center of the plaza was a large fountain on a raised dais, and rows of lights on the underside of the dome illuminated the inside of the building. 13 announced, a floundering shipwreck, a slick landslide, a raging fire, a howling windstorm, a sprawling mountain, and a devastated city. This building is a training ground I designed to simulate all manner of natural disasters, the unforeseen simulation joint. Kaminari blinked. So it's not Universal Studios Japan? Jiru smacked the blonde upside the head with a jack, even as the heroine sighed. They make that joke every year, kid. You're hardly original. Aizawa-sensei walked up to the other teacher, hands in his pockets. "Where's All Might? The blonde buffoon was supposed to meet us here." 13 stepped close and whispered something to the hero, holding up 3 fingers on her left hand. Izuku wondered what they were discussing, only for a chill to run down his spine. Izuku glanced around the dome, flexing his fingers. This sense of foreboding, what's going on? Aizawa-sensei sighed and turned to face 1A. "Unfortunately, it seems All Might won't be joining us until the end of class. In any case, let's begin." 13 clasped her hands together. "Now, before we get started, allow me to say just a few things." She held up her left hand and flexed her fingers. "I'm certain some of you are familiar with my quirk, Black Hole, yes?" Uraraka started nodding so fast, Izuku was afraid her head would fall off. "You've used it to save so many people from all kinds of disasters." 13 nodded. "Indeed. However, it is also a power that can all too easily kill." A hushed air fell over the class. "I'm certain many of your own quirks are the same. While it's not a problem due to the stringent regulation of quirks, do not forget that many quirks can take a life with one wrong step. Aizawa-sen's physical exams helped you discover hidden uses for your powers. All Might's combat exercise surely showed you the danger of using those powers on others. However, consider this class a fresh start. Here, you will learn how to use your quirks to save lives." She bowed gracefully. "That is all I have to say." Aizawa-sensei grunted and pushed off from the pillar he was leaning against. "Right. With that out of the way, let's—" Suddenly, the lights shut off, and the class started glancing around in confusion. Izuku swore under his breath and scanned the area. The fountain in the plaza began stuttering, and the air warped in front of it. Purple mist swirled into existence before exploding out into a massive fog bank that stretched across the path. A hand emerged from the fog and gripped it, and a head covered in a gray severed hand emerged, staring up at the gathered class. Aizawa-sensei barked, "Stay together and keep still. 13. Protect the students." Kirishima looked up and leaned back. "What's that?" Down in the plaza, several sinister figures began streaming from the fog bank, slowly walking towards the stairs. The first person stepped fully onto the bricks, revealing a simple all-black outfit and more severed hands gripping his arms and shoulders. Kirishima squinted at the gathering below. "Is this like the entrance exam, where the lessons already started?" Aizawa-sensei ordered, "Don't move. Those are villains." The hero reached into his scarf and retrieved a pair of slitted yellow goggles, sliding them up over his eyes. Izuku was briefly overcome with fanboying, but that was quickly cast aside as he refocused on the crowd of villains streaming into the plaza. "This is bad." Aizawa-sensei no. Eraserhead pulled on his capture scarf, the weapon immediately flying out from his neck and quivering in midair like some deranged set of tentacles. 13 held an arm out protectively, placing herself between the students and the villains. Kirishima protested, "There's no way villains could get into the school." Yayurazu pushed forward to the front of the pack. "Sensei, what about the intruder sensors?" 13 paused. "We have them, of course, but—" Todoroki hummed. "Did the villains only appear here, or did they attack the school at the same time? Either way, if the sensors aren't responding, then someone's quirk is jamming them. They isolated us far away from the main campus. This surprise attack was meticulously planned with some sort of ulterior goal in mind. But what?" Eraserhead stepped forward in front of the class. 13. Start evacuating the students. Try to contact the school, too. Kaminari, you do the same. I'm leaving them to you." The hero crouched before leaping down the stairs, his scarf streaming out behind him. Mineta cried, "What is he doing? He can't fight that many people at once. He's gonna get himself killed." Izuku grunted. "Don't count on it. If he's who I think he is, he's definitely got a good chance of kicking their asses. Still, this isn't exactly his forte. His specialty is a one-on-one fight, or a sneak attack from behind. Large crowds aren't his style. Eraserhead quickly set about proving Izuku wrong, leaping into the mass of villains and proceeding to tear the evildoers a new trouble. Izuku let out a noise of surprise before shaking his head and turning on his heel. You heard the man. Folks, we're sitting ducks here. We've gotta move. Everybody back to the bus. The class started running back towards the double doors, only for purple fog to shoot up from the ground in front of them. I can't allow that. 13 immediately held her arms out protectively, standing between the students and the villain. A pleasure to meet you. We are the League of Villains. We have invited ourselves here, to this den of heroes, so that All Might may take his last breath. The glowing yellow eyes at the top of the cloud tilted. And yet, he is not here. Was the information we received inaccurate? Still, my role remains the same. Kirishima crouched, preparing to jump at the villain, but Izuku shot forward and grabbed the redhead's arm. Don't. That's a suicide mission. The villain announced, I will scatter you all and torture you to death. Purple mist exploded outwards, and the cap on 13's right index finger popped open. I won't allow that. A powerful vortex of wind halted the mist, before drawing it towards the heroine's finger at a rapid pace. The villain froze, his body being dragged towards 13 ever so slowly. Izuku barked, Ida, go. Get out of here while he's distracted. As vice representative, I cannot in good faith abandon you here to fend for yourselves. You're not abandoning us, you're getting reinforcements. Run. Thankfully, the teen nodded and slammed his helmet over his head, his engines roaring to life and sending him shooting along the path towards the exit. The villain's eyes narrowed. Are you truly so foolish as to discuss your plans right in front of the enemy? 13 retorted. You're not going anywhere. The villain chuckled. 13, you are a rescue hero, one who specializes in disaster relief. Your combat experience is less than half of a normal hero's. Another cloud of purple mist formed behind the heroine, and her black hole was channeled through the portal, shredding the back of her protective suit. 13 had the control to shut off her quirk quickly, but the damage was already done. The villain's eyes crinkled in satisfaction. You have turned yourself to dust, and now I may fulfill my role. A blur shot forward, and the villain choked on his spit as he was hauled backwards through the air. Izuku's grip tightened on the villain's exposed neck brace, his hair a brilliant white. No, you don't. As long as I'm still breathing, you aren't laying a finger on them. Katsuki caught on quickly, yanking his mask down over his eyes and blasting off, catching up to the two of them with sparks building up on his right palm. Say good night, dirtbag. Red flashed out from his capsule and fused with Katsuki in an instant, and a massive explosion of fire ripped into the villain, sending him flying into the underside of the glass dome of the Asche. Izuku and Katsuki dropped to the ground, sliding a couple feet before skidding to a stop. At the same time, Ida wrenched the doors open and squeezed through, the roar of his engines signifying that he had taken off towards the school. The mist villain peeled himself off the glass, his eyes squinting. My, that's troublesome. If that boy contacts the teachers, then all this will be for naught. He turned his gaze on the class, and where Izuku and Katsuki were standing defensively in front of them. I must not forget that you are all brilliant golden eggs. You two in particular are quite troublesome. Perhaps you should be dealt with personally. Purple mist swirled underneath their feet, but Izuku quickly exchanged white for green, floating off the ground. Katsuki took to the skies, keeping himself aloft with continued blasts from his palms. Nice try, dickhead. Let's see what else you've got. The villain's eyes narrowed. Interesting. Flight is a rare ability, and yet here are two within the same class. You are quite intriguing, boy with the changing hair colors. Izuku cracked his knuckles with a glare. I'd say I'm flattered, but I don't value the opinions of villains too highly. Katsuki shouted. You're already done for. The cavalry is on its way, and you're not laying a finger on us. The villain sighed. So it would seem. Suddenly, the mist vanished, and Izuku swore under his breath, spinning in midair to glare down at the fountain. As expected, the villain rose from the floor next to the one covered in hands. However, that was quickly driven from his mind, his heart leaping into his throat as he noticed that Eraserhead was pinned to the floor by a massively muscular villain. With barely a thought, he exchanged green for cyan and streaked through the air, bouncing off the underside of the dome and aiming straight for his teacher. He grabbed Eraserhead by the shoulders and pulled with all his might, ripping the hero from the Leviathan's grasp. Another flash saw him reform at the top of the stairs, his teacher held firmly in his hands. The misty villain leaned in close to the villain standing next to the fountain, who slowly raised his head to stare up at Izuku. His hands came up and started scratching at his neck furiously. For some reason, a chill ran down Izuku's spine. He slowly set Eraserhead down on the floor and crouched, adrenaline at full blast. The monster suddenly vanished, and the breath was driven from Izuku's lungs as the world suddenly blurred. 1 second, he was standing defensively next to his class, and the next, he was held in midair by the neck in the hand villain's face. Dimly, he realized that the Leviathan had him held in one meaty hand, easily encapsulating his entire back. The hand villain stepped closer, scratching at his neck with his left hand, and his head tilted curiously. "Well, you're quite the interesting NPC. Not many units could beat Namu's command grab. Who are you?" Izuku glared at the villain. "Nobody you'll ever have the chance to see again. Face the facts, the heroes are on their way, and my classmates are untouched. You've lost, plain and simple." The villain chuckled dryly. "Are you sure about that, NPC? Namu here is just as powerful as any pro-hero unit you can think of. In fact, he's been specifically designed to kill All Might. He's our cheat code, the bioengineered anti-symbol of peace." Izuku scowled, but he had to admit that the beast holding him captive was undoubtedly strong. It had taken him everything he had to wrench Eraserhead from this thing's hands, and even then he'd probably caught it off guard. "Maybe so, but you aren't dealing with just All Might, are you? When it comes to heroes, 1 + 1 = 3. And every hero on US staff is coming here right now. I doubt Namu could stand up to that." The hand villain huffed. "Mouthy little brat, aren't you?" The mist villain rumbled. "Shigaraki Tamura, the boy has a point. With the heroes on their way, there is a high likelihood that we will suffer severe losses. It may be wise to leave now." Shigaraki grunted. "I'm still tempted to dust you for letting one of those NPCs get out, Kirigiri. But you're our home warp, so I can't. I guess you're right, this is probably game over. But why don't we leave a little present on our way out? Something to break All Might's pride as the uncontested symbol of peace." His hand reached out towards Izuku, frozen in Namu's grip. Pink let out the closest thing she had to a roar, shooting from her capsule and embedding her top spike into his palm. Shigaraki screeched in pain and flung the wisp away from him, clutching his right wrist with 4 fingers of his left hand. "Namu, kill that thing." Izuku dropped to the ground as the monster released him, flashing across the bricks and grabbing Pink in one massive hand. The wisp shrieked as Namu's grip tightened, the beast ignoring the spikes stabbing through its scarred flesh. Izuku's heart leapt into his throat, and he dashed across the plaza, reaching out with one hand. "No." His hair suddenly lit up with all the colors of the rainbow, his body moving without thinking. Swirling energy surrounded his body, and he leapt towards the monster, his eyes blazing and his right arm raised. "Get your hands off of her." His fist slammed into the side of Namu's face, and a shockwave blasted the surrounding area, blowing the nearest villains off their feet. Namu skidded across the ground, plowing trenches in the bricks with the talons on its feet. Izuku curled into a ball and allowed the shockwave to force him back towards the stairs, clutching Pink against his chest. Shigaraki gaped, but Izuku ignored the villain as he held Pink in his arms. The wisp was unconscious, her single eye blank and unmoving. She didn't respond to his touch, and his heart sank into his stomach. He curled up on the ground, hugging her tight as tears leaked from his eyes. No, 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 no. There was another explosion, this time from the top of the stairs, and Shigaraki laughed. About time, Namu, kill All Might. There was another, gentler blur, and Izuku found himself deposited at the top of the stairs next to Eraserhead. All Might murmured, "It's all right now, young Midoriya, because I am here." Another gust of wind signified the heroes rushed down the stairs, but Izuku could only clutch at the limp form in his arms. The other wisps flew out from their capsules, hovering over him with worry in their eyes. Katsuki stepped forward, and his breath hitched. No. In that moment, something snapped. Izuku's hair turned a dark shade of purple, swaying as though it was underwater. He slowly floated upwards, pink spilling from his arms and landing on the floor. Purple energy swirled around his body, before concentrating around his hands and mouth and turning into ghostly claws and fangs. His eyes slid open, revealing that they were now a solid, glowing yellow. His mouth opened, and purple smoke flowed from his throat alongside a low snarl. Uraraka held a hand out towards him, but Katsuki stepped in front of her, gently pushing her back. Izuku growled, purple energy flowing over his costume and completely covering his body. He floated down and grabbed the floor, the energy digging into the pavement. His muscles tensed, and the ground cracked around his hands, before he took off. Katsuki darted forward and grabbed Pink's lifeless form off the ground, desperately turning her over in his hands. Come on, come on. How the hell do you do CPR on something that doesn't have a mouth? Toshinori swore under his breath as he jumped away from the beast, his old wound from 6 years ago reopened by the creature's sharp fingers. This thing, it knew right where to aim, to hit me where it hurts. But I know I killed All for one. I crushed his skull into paste. Shigaraki gloated. Having trouble, All Might. You won't be able to take Namu down so easily. He's a super efficient punching bag that punches back. You won't take him down with brute force. You'd probably have better luck slowly gouging out his flesh bit by bit, but he wouldn't be that patient. Suddenly, an animalistic roar shook the area, and a glowing purple figure shot past Toshinori, bounding across the bricks on all fours and leaping onto Namu, its eyes glowing with primal fury. It proceeded to tear into the monster with shadowy purple claws and ghostly fangs around its mouth, ripping off chunks of flesh and devouring pieces of skin. The whole time, it produced a furious growl that refused to die down, even when its mouth should have been otherwise occupied. Is that young Tokoyami's Quirk? No, I saw him back up at the top of the stairs, and he didn't seem close to rampaging like this, and the shape of the head makes me think otherwise. If anything, those curls most resemble young Midoriya. The newcomer roared again as it tore Namu's left arm off, howling at the ceiling as the purple energy coating its body covered the severed appendage, absorbing the arm into its own mass. Shigaraki scowled and ordered, "Kurogiri, get that thing off of Namu." The figure whirled towards Shigaraki's voice, murder in its eyes. Its mouth creaked open, and young Midoriya snarled, "You." Shigaraki took a step back, his eyes widening. Kurogiri. Young Midoriya took a step in the villain's direction, flexing his claws. "You hurt my little sister? You nearly killed her." Shigaraki protested, "I didn't even hit anyone other than Eraserhead." Young Midoriya snarled, "Liar. You ordered your pet to kill her. You hurt her. You nearly killed her." Shigaraki took another step back. Kurogiri, stop this thing. Get it away from me." The misty villain obediently formed a portal underneath young Midoriya, and the student fell through. In his peripheral vision, Toshinori spotted the boy falling through the air towards the flood zone, still coated in that demonic energy. Shigaraki barked, "Namu, kill All Might while that thing isn't here." Toshinori immediately put up his guard, but the beast lay still against the bricks. As he looked closer, he could see faint wisps of purple coating its wounds and the stump on its left shoulder. That energy coating young Midoriya must be blocking its ability to regenerate. Shigaraki scowled. Damn it, damn it, damn it. How the hell did it disable our cheat code? Kirigiri floated closer to his charge. Shigaraki Tamura. The Namu has been disabled. The other teachers are en route, and I was only able to delay that thing for so long. We must retreat while we are still able. Shigaraki grunted, glaring at Toshinori. Fine. Toshinori scowled and prepared a Texas smash. And who said I would just let you leave? A geyser of water erupted from the flood zone, and young Midoriya snarled wordlessly as he bounded across the landscape. Shigaraki screeched, Kirigiri, do something. A portal formed in young Midoriya's path, redirecting the student and sending him careening into Toshinori. The boy hit with more force than expected, knocking him back and disorienting him just long enough for Shigaraki to duck through one of Kirigiri's portals. Young Midoriya snarled and leaped for the portal, only to soar through wisps of purple smoke and crash into the bricks by the fountain. The student sprang upright, still on all fours and snarling wordlessly. Toshinori cautiously approached him, holding a hand out cautiously. Young Midoriya, are you all right? He hurt my little sister. He needs to pay. Toshinori hummed. I understand, but he's not here anymore. Your sister is no longer in any danger. You can stop fighting now. Young Midoriya, it's all right. The boy slowly relaxed, shrinking down slightly as the purple energy began to leave his body, flowing up his costume and pulling along his face before retreating behind his eyes. The yellow glow faded, and young Midoriya swayed, before tipping sideways and collapsing on the floor. Toshinori shot forward and laid two thick fingers against the boy's neck, breathing a sigh of relief as he felt the student's carotid arteries pulsing. Good, he's still alive. It was at that moment that the rest of the faculty arrived, alongside young Ida. Toshinori quickly scooped up young Midoriya in his arms and carried him up the stairs. When he reached the gathered students, he cursed under his breath when he saw that the pink wisp was carefully laid out on the ground, its singular eye blank and unmoving. I suppose that answers what he meant by his little sister. Katsuki met Toshinori's gaze. Is he gonna be okay? Toshinori cautiously set young Midoriya down next to the pink wisp. Young Midoriya should be all right. He merely exhausted himself with that newfound power. However, I cannot say for certain if she will wake up. What happened to put her in this condition, young Bakugo? The blonde glanced to the side. That big villain had dragged Izuku down to the fountain before anyone could react. When the hand guy tried to grab Izuku's face, Pink stabbed him through the palm. Hand guy ordered the big guy to kill her, and he'd started squeezing her really hard until Izuku somehow punched him out of the way. The shockwave bounced both of them over to the base of the stairs, then you showed up and moved them up here. I would have tried CPR, but, well, no chest, no mouth. Toshinori nodded grimly, meeting Nedzu's gaze with his own. I see. Are there any other injuries? Young Yayurazu spoke up. Just Aizawa-sensei and 13-sensei. The rest of us weren't even touched, since Midoriya-kun and Bakugo-kun kept the mist villain from attacking us. Nedzu hummed. Well, we can take solace in the fact that there were very few casualties from this attack. However, it remains to be seen whether or not there will be a death toll. I sincerely hope not. Katsuki scowled as he leaned against the wall of the hospital room. Initially, the doctors had tried to make him go with his class, but he'd made it abundantly clear that he wasn't leaving Izuku's side at a time like this. The nerd in question was currently laying in a bed, dressed in a hospital gown and slowly breathing. His hero costume had been carefully removed and sent back to UA for repairs. Pink was laying atop a medicine cart next to him, her single eye having been manually closed by one of the on-site paramedics. Antinko had shown up at the hospital barely, even a minute after Izuku had been admitted. The woman had been fraught with grief, and only marginally calmed down when Recovery Girl told her that Izuku was just suffering from quirk exhaustion. While her son may have been in relatively fine condition, Katsuki knew that she'd come to consider the Wisps as her own children, and Pink's state had practically broken her. Auntie had been effectively catatonic when the hag showed up. Thankfully, Mom had always had a knack for reading the room. She barely spent any time fussing over Katsuki, quickly understanding that he was unscathed and gently guiding Auntie from the room. Logically, Katsuki knew that this wasn't such a terrible outcome. The attack on the Ust could have turned out a lot worse than a single injured student and 2 wounded teachers. Their classmates were completely untouched physically, at least, and a vast majority of the attacking villains were arrested, including the big bird guy. Statistically speaking, this was a major victory for the heroes. In spite of that, Katsuki still scowled. His brother in all but BLD had come far too close to dying for his liking. And if what the nerd had said was any indication, he might as well have lost a 4 years younger sister, too. He didn't even know if Pink was still alive or not for all he knew. Her corpse was lying there on that bedside table. The other wisps weren't much better. White was constantly pacing back and forth in midair, 2 tentacles behind his back. Cyan had a permanent scowl and kept jolting between the overhead lights. Red was uncharacteristically morose, still fused with Katsuki. Orange was hovering over Pink's body, flitting back and forth. Yellow was settled atop Katsuki's hair, his usually active stripes now grimly dormant. Green had lost her usual optimism and kept warbling something under her breath that Katsuki still had no chance of understanding. Blue was practically catatonic, sitting on the floor and leaning against the foot of Izuku's bed. None of them had the exuberance and playfulness Katsuki had come to know them for. A sudden stomping from the hallway caught his attention, and he pushed off from the wall as the door slammed open. The conscious wisps all erupted into startled motion, and Katsuki pinched the bridge of his nose with a sigh, before loudly clapping his hands together. "Guys, chill." After a few seconds, the wisps calmed down, and Katsuki turned his glare on the newcomer, who he recognized as the support chick from a couple days ago. "Mind telling me why you thought it was a good idea to barge into a hospital room where a guy's in a coma?" She stared back, unfazed. "Well, if you don't want me to share my hypothesis on what might help Pink, then maybe I'll just leave." The wisps all snapped their gazes to her, and Katsuki narrowed his eyes. "Talk." Recovery Girl click-clacked into the room, swiping her cane at Dreadlock's shin. "Out, girlie! You're no medical student, and from what I've heard from Majima, I don't want any of your babies near that boy." Dreadlock scoffed. "I wasn't going to use any babies. It's just that you have preconceived notions about biology and might not consider what I'm proposing, so Emlay." She actually stuck her tongue out at the old lady, and Katsuki took a moment to be impressed by this girl's sheer confidence. Recovery Girl sighed and pinched the bridge of her nose. "Tell me what your idea is before trying to act on it, and I'll tell you if it seems reasonable or not." Hatsune nodded. "Fine by me." Now, I was fiddling around with the wisp capsule prototype that I kept, and I started wondering about the wisps themselves. Like, they don't have mouths or noses or seemingly any internal organs outside of their eyes. So how do they live? Because they definitely live, but they don't seem to get their energy from anywhere. And then I started thinking about how they can fuse with people. They have mass, obviously, but when they fuse, the host doesn't seem to gain any extra mass, and the mass doesn't really seem to go anywhere. So what are they made of? And then the answer hit me light. Light answers everything about the wisps. Katsuki frowned. How so? Think about it. Light is composed of photons, which are particles that have mass, but they act like a wave, a form of energy. When the wisps are separate from people, their bodies become physical, more like traditional matter. But they're like photons, so they're able to float and move around without any sort of propulsion. And when they fuse, their bodies act like a wave, like a unique form of energy. Energy is stored in matter, and the wisps are stored in a host's hair. So when they're unfused, they're basically pure energy condensed into a physical form. The fact that they each have a signature color, a signature wavelength of light, pretty much confirms it. They're living energy. Katsuki held up a hand. Okay, so you figured out what they're made of. Congrats. So they're living light particles, or whatever. How does that help us fix Pink? Hatsune beamed. Simple, since they're made of light. They absorb more light in order to stay energized. So, since Pink is in poor shape, we just gotta get her light energy that she can absorb and use to heal up. Katsuki paused. That might actually work. I have noticed that they tend to be more energetic during the summer, especially on cloudless days. But I'm not sure if the difference is large enough that shining light on Pink to heal her would be viable. He hummed, raising a hand to his chin. Though, I've noticed that Izuku's always had a huge appetite, especially in the mornings when they're less active. Maybe part of their energy is absorbed directly from him? Recovery Girl nodded slowly. That would make sense, since a majority of sentient quirks tend to draw on their host's metabolism. Though, in the case of the wisps, it could be that they can also draw energy from the person they fuse with, as well. She stared at him pointedly. Have you been feeling particularly drained recently? Don't think I don't see those red highlights in your hair, boy? Katsuki frowned. No, I haven't felt any worse than usual. Either Red doesn't draw energy from me, or he hasn't because he's been inactive. Almost like he's asleep or catatonic. Hatsune clapped her hands together. So, we agree that we can give my hypothesis a shot. Recovery Girl hummed. Maybe. I need to get in contact with a counselor that registered Midoriya's quirk. See if they might have anything to add to this. She turned back to Katsuki. In the meantime, I won't try to force you out, but you should probably take a break from watching Midoriya for your own mental health. Katsuki huffed, but reluctantly headed for the door regardless. He paused to throw a backwards glance at Izuku's prone form, before nodding at the two remaining occupants and heading towards the lobby. Come on, Zu, you'd better wake up. We promised to be the #1 hero duo, and I'm not letting you give up your end of the deal. Ugh, you're impossible. You keep insisting on charging way too much for what I'm asking. Hisashi seethed internally, but kept his face impassive. Sir, I know that having your own merchandise is an important step in a hero's career, but we simply can't accept exposure as payment. Our policy requires that the customer provide some form of capital before we can begin work. The hero standing over him bristled. Come on, my image would make millions. It already does, over in Japan. Hisashi resisted the urge to pinch the bridge of his nose. Sir, I've told you before, your resemblance to Hawks will only get you so far. We require concrete payment to begin work. Takahiro huffed and crossed his arms. Fine, if you won't do it, then I'll go find someone who will. The hero stormed off, and Hisashi let out a deep sigh, sinking in his chair and pressing his forefingers into his closed eyelids. I swear, if I could just have 1 week away from this. His cell phone beeped, and he pulled it out, grunting as he read the notification on the lock screen. His eyes shot wide open, and he quickly shut the meager door to his cubicle, spinning in his office chair and unlocking his phone. Breaking news, UA first years attacked by villains. Hero News Network Japan branch. UA High School was attacked on Thursday, April 22, 2234, by a group calling themselves the League of Villains. The group used a warping quirk to place themselves inside the unforeseen simulation joint, an isolated facility on the edge of the campus. At the time of the attack, the first-year hero course class 1A was at the facility, reportedly for a class field trip. The class was trapped within the facility with over 150 thirsty villains. Reports indicate that the class homeroom teacher Aizawa Shouda ordered fellow Pro Hero 13 to protect the students, before jumping down and taking on the mass of villains single-handedly. However, one of the villains, the warper by the name of Kirigiri, appeared between the class and the exit. 13 attempted to apprehend the villain, but Kirigiri injured her severely, before turning his sights to the students. The students were forced to defend themselves, as the class representative Midoriya Izuku and his classmate Bakugo Katsuki drove Kirigiri away from their peers. While they held the villain off, the Vice Representative Ida Tenya managed to exit the facility, running towards the main building to alert the rest of the faculty. It was at this time that Aizawa was suddenly pinned to the ground by another of the villains, referred to as Namu. Kurogiri warped away from the students, causing Midoriya to notice his homeroom teacher's situation. He managed to free Aizawa from Namu's grip and bring him to the other students, but at the cost of drawing the villain's attention. Reports claim that Namu was ordered by the ringleader, Shigaraki Tamura, to grab Midoriya and bring him down to the central plaza. After a brief verbal exchange, Shigaraki attempted to use his reported decay quirk on Midoriya's face as he had done to Aizawa's elbow. At this point, Midoriya's sentient quirk attacked Shigaraki, stabbing the villain through the palm. According to witness reports, Namu then released Midoriya and grabbed hold of the boy's quirk, nearly crushing it to death. In response, Midoriya apparently struck Namu hard enough to send the villain flying, with the side effect of flinging himself towards the stairs leading to the exit. It was at this time that All Might arrived on the scene, quickly transporting Midoriya to his classmates before engaging Namu. At this point, reports from his classmates indicate that Midoriya suddenly entered some sort of berserker state. Midoriya ran back down the stairs and tore into Namu in a feral rage, managing to tear off several chunks of flesh and even ripping off the villain's left arm. Reportedly, Namu stopped moving at this point, and the animalistic Midoriya turned his attention to Kurogiri and Shigaraki. Midoriya reportedly lunged at the two villains, but was redirected at All Might, stalling the hero long enough for Kurogiri and Shigaraki to escape. Shortly after, the other faculty members arrived to subdue and arrest all remaining villains at the Yasuji. Midoriya has apparently since fallen into a coma and shows no signs of recovery. Thankfully, all the other students were unharmed, and both Aizawa, Shouta, and 13 are expected to make full recoveries within the month. However, it remains to be seen if Midoriya Izuku will awaken. UA has also closed for the time being, reportedly to beef up its security measures. Principal Nedzu was unavailable for comment at the time of writing. More information will be added as it arrives. Hisashi felt the BLD drain from his face, barely even reacting as the door to his cubicle swung open. Hisashi, I just got word that another client walked out on you. If you keep losing customers like this, you're looking at a pay cut or worse. Hisashi glanced up at his manager. Sir, my son's class was just attacked by villains, and he's in a coma. Could I just have 1 week off to go check on him and my wife? His manager sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. I've told you 1,000 times, Hisashi. We don't give time off for villain attacks. If we did, nobody would ever come in for work. I'm truly sorry about your son, but you're going to have to step up in order to meet your quota. Hisashi had spent years honing his patience. He was a far cry from the firebrand that he used to be, and while he still had a temper, he liked to think that he could temporarily keep it in check. However, at that moment, he snapped. His manager blinked. Excuse me. Hisashi clenched his fist. He stood up from his office chair, his eyes blazing and smoke leaking from his mouth. My only son is in the hospital due to being attacked by villains, and all you can tell me is that I need to work harder. FCK this job, FCK your job, and FCK this whole goddamn company while I'm at it. His manager bristled. Hisashi, that is no way. The bastard was cut off by Hisashi throwing back his head and screeching wordlessly, a jet of flame scorching the ceiling. All conversation in the office halted, and all eyes turned to them. Hisashi stepped forward, stuffing his phone in his pocket and grabbing his manager's tie. 13 years. I've dedicated 13 goddamn years to this place, thousands of miles away from my wife and only son, putting in hours and hours of overtime until the bags under my eyes could hold my laptop. For years I've done my job as I was told, with no complaints from management. I endured clients with a smile. I sweet-talked customers into paying more than they probably should have. Hell, I even convinced government inspectors that this building was up to code even when some parts of it definitely aren't. I've devoted months and months to this job, and yet when I only ask for a single week, you tell me no, and work even harder while you're at it. Well, I've had enough. I quit." He shoved the poor excuse of a man to the floor and turned on his heel, grabbing the photo of his family off his desk. He shut his laptop and stuck it under his arm, before turning around and stepping over the manager that was laying on the floor, dumbstruck. He stormed past the rows of cubicles, ignoring the stares sent his way, as he headed to the lobby and grabbed his coat from the rack. He grabbed his messenger bag from the rack, stashing his laptop and picture frame inside. His manager finally caught up as he yanked open one of the front doors. "Hisashi, wait. Maybe there's been a miscommunication here. Look, I'll give you a raise. How does $5 more an hour sound?" Hisashi turned his withering stare on the man. "It sounds dumb. When I signed on, you made it abundantly clear that my pay was on a per-sale basis. And frankly, the pay was never my concern. I've poured out blood, sweat, and tears for this place, and all I got in return was a single paycheck every month. The only reason I stuck around this long was because my earnings were at least decent. I was hoping that maybe management would finally let me see my son for the first time since before his quirk manifested. But now I see that you dragged me away from my family just so you could extort a lifetime of labor. Well, I quit. I've had enough of this place. I'm going back to Japan." He turned on his heel and strode out of the building, ignoring the manager's desperate cries as he stormed off. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, scrolling through his contacts list and hitting the call button. The line only rang once before she picked up. "Hisashi, whatever it was you called me to talk about, now's not the time. Izuku." "I know, sweetheart," Hisashi interrupted. "I saw a news article about it on my phone. My manager came by to berate me about a client that had just walked out on me. I requested a week off, Inko. Just 1 week, to check up on you too. And the bastard had the gall to tell me to work harder. I promise, I've been trying to request the time off to come home ever since you called me about Izu's quirk manifesting. I thought that if I kept devoting myself to the company, they'd eventually let me see you too. But today was the last straw. I'm getting on the next plane to Japan and coming home immediately." There was a long pause as Hisashi walked down the street. Eventually, Inko sighed and responded, "I'll start looking for jobs in the area for you. Are you still into merchandising, or would you prefer something else?" Hisashi grinned. "I think it's about time I take a more active role in our son's future career. See what you can find on support work in Musutafu." Inko giggled. "Oh, you and your little gadgets. Fine." Her voice suddenly took on a serious tone. "You'd better not be lying to me, Hisashi. You remember our senior prom, don't you? And my fine control has only gotten better since." Hisashi nodded gravely. "Of course I remember, Inko. Rest assured, I have no intention of having my manhood forcibly removed." He chuckled. "And for the record, if you hadn't done that, I probably would have burned off the guys you-know-what." Inko snorted. "Of course you would have, dear. Now get home quickly." Hisashi spoke into the microphone. "Love you, darling. See you soon, I promise." The next day. The first thing that registered in Izuku's mind was how tired he felt. Someone poked his shoulder, and he groaned, turning over and pulling the covers up over his face. Too tired, let me nap. Then his memory kicked in, and he bolted upright. Pink. A hand pressed against his chest, slowly lowering him back down against the pillows. Easy, nerd. The rest of his senses caught up with his brain, and Izuku registered that he was lying in a hospital bed, wearing a light blue gown. Katsuki was on his left, Mom stood on his right, and Recovery Girl was writing on her clipboard by the foot of the bed. How long was I out? Mom frowned slightly. About 2 days. The USJ attack was on Thursday, today is Saturday. Izuku glanced to the side and froze, the BLD draining from his face as he noticed Pink lying limp on a table next to his bed. Is she? Katsuki huffed. Near as we can tell, she's alive, thankfully. Squeezed within an inch of her life, sure, but still kicking metaphorically speaking. That chick in support Hatsune, I think her name has had a crazy idea that I'm pretty sure worked. Izuku paused. How so? Recovery Girl set down her pen and huffed. She hypothesized that your wisps are composed of an energy that acts much like photons, hence their levitation and fusion. Going off of that, she proposed that they absorb light for energy. She thought that since Pink was trying to draw energy from you while you were out from quirk exhaustion, it was creating a feedback loop that was keeping the both of you unconscious. So, if we gave Pink a different energy source to draw on, you would recover from your quirk exhaustion. Then, once your own energy was back, Pink would be able to recover fully. At least, that's the idea. Katsuki continued. So far, it seems like she had it right. You were out cold for a while, but once we brought in that sun lamp, you started showing signs of life, and now you're awake. Mom reached into her bag and pulled out several Tupperware containers, all packed with Izuku's favorite foods. And now that you're conscious, you can work on getting your strength back up. Since your only issue is quirk exhaustion, you're cleared for non-hospital food right away. Izuku hummed as Mom passed him a container of pork ramen and a pair of chopsticks. Did everyone make it out okay? He started eating, quickly speeding up once he realized just how hungry he was. Katsuki hummed and crossed his arms. You're the only injured student. None of the others got anywhere close to the villains, since you and I kept that Misty guy away from him. 13's suit got torn open, but thankfully she only tore the surface layer of her skin before her quirk shut off. There's a doctor at this hospital who can grow huge patches of skin from a small sample, so once that gets grafted, she'll be ready to go. Aizawa-sensei busted a few ribs, got his left arm broken, and lost some skin and muscle on his right elbow, but the medics said he could have been injured a lot worse if you hadn't gotten him out of there. All in all, not terrible. Sure, could have done without Pink's injuries, but hey, sometimes you gotta look on the bright side. Izuku took a huge sip of the broth, then set the container down on his lap and swallowed. So, what'd I miss in school yesterday? Katsuki snorted so hard he started coughing, and Recovery Girl immediately started whacking him in the back with her cane. Mom giggled and said, Sweetie, Yua got attacked by villains. School was cancelled yesterday. You didn't miss anything. Izuku breathed a sigh of relief. Good. I'd hate to have missed out on my studies. White snorted. Yep, he's feeling better. Izuku glanced over at where the other wisps were gathered in the corner, pausing as he ran a quick mental head count. Hey, where's Red? Katsuki pounded a fist into his chest and coughed out. Still fused. Hasn't responded at all since Thursday. I think he dissociated, or something like that. Izuku grunted, noticing the dim red highlights in Katsuki's hair. Huh, are you feeling okay? We've never tested what happens if a wisp is fused for that long. Katsuki, now recovered from his coughing fit, shrugged. Nothing out of the ordinary. If there's a stamina drain, it's hardly noticeable. Like I said, totally inactive since Thursday. I think he took Pink's situation the hardest out of all of them. Izuku nodded. Makes sense. They always stuck together. He paused. Hey, where's my hero costume? Mom hummed. They got it off when you were admitted to the hospital. Apparently, they get a lot of injured heroes here, so the orderlies are experienced in removing costumes from unconscious patients. I think one of the nurses said it was sent back to UF for maintenance. Suddenly, the door slammed open, and the wisps flew in front of Izuku protectively. The other people turned to the newcomer, a man with curly black hair much like Izuku's own. Is Izuku all right? Mom giggled. For once, your timing is impeccable, dear. Izuku just woke up a few minutes ago. The man heaved a sigh of relief, straightening and pounding his chest with the inside of his fist a couple times. Thank God. I was worried he'd died before I could see him again. A few wisps of smoke left his mouth, And Izuku paused. Dad? Katsuki blinked. Uncle Hisashi. Dad grinned at Izuku. Hey, kiddo. Sorry I didn't come back home earlier. Management? He paused, then chuckled. I mean, I was busy getting the milk. Izuku snorted, and White rolled his eye. I see you got your sense of humor from him. Dad glanced at the wisps. Oh, you guys must be his Quirk. Sorry I couldn't introduce myself sooner. My job wouldn't let me leave. He scowled. 13 years of tireless labor, and they wouldn't give me 1 week off. Izuku blinked. Wait, if they wouldn't give you time off, then how are you here in Japan? Dad chuckled and rubbed at the back of his neck. Well, kiddo, you're going to be seeing a lot more of me now, 'cause I kinda quit my old job. Mom smirked. He claims he stormed out in a blaze of glory. Or fury. Supposedly, they were interchangeable. I just hope it wasn't literal. Dad rolled his eyes. Oh, come on, I only scorched the ceiling over my cubicle. Nothing serious. Izuku hummed. So, are you gonna get another job in merchandise or something like that? Dad shook his head. Nope, I'm looking to see if there's anywhere in the area that does support gear. Recovery Girl raised an eyebrow. That's so, because Majima's recently been wanting someone to help with workshop supervision. Dad blinked. Wait, seriously, there's a job opening at UA in the support department. Nedzu suddenly dropped out of a ceiling grate, startling everyone except Izuku, Recovery Girl, and the Wisps. Technically no, but being me has its privileges. I must say, it's a pleasure to meet you, Midoriya-san. Your son is quite the interesting student, I will say. Izuku balked. Crud, the class rep Discord server. I still haven't finished setting it up. Nedzu chuckled and patted Izuku's foot. Not to worry, Midoriya-kun. I took the liberty of arranging everything there. Rest assured, the other class representatives have settled into their roles quite smoothly. I did instruct them to hold off on, I believe the term is pinging you until such a time that you awoke. However, that should be changing right about. He pulled back his left sleeve and checked the watch on his wrist. Ankle? Whatever. Now. Izuku's phone, sitting on a bedside table to his left, suddenly started dinging like crazy, a flood of Discord notifications nearly making it buzz itself off the stand. Fortunately, Cyan darted over and caught it before it hit the floor, then set it on Izuku's lap as Mom took the ramen container from him. General. Our Radin Savior, Midoriya is awake now. You may proceed. Sanake, at Taste the Rainbow, are you well? I hope I managed to alert the faculty quickly enough. Catch the Sea Hands B, at Taste the Rainbow, are you okay? You trigger Edmatrap card B. At Taste the Rainbow, please respond if you are able. Keep Command Kikas C. At Taste the Rainbow, I know you can see this. Respond, dude. Gotcha bitch C. At Taste the Rainbow, you're one of the few I've met. You'd better be alive. Am I this a terrible thing to read D? At Taste the Rainbow, come on. Pick up the phone already. Chin up bro D. At Taste the Rainbow bro. Tell us you're okay. Green Thumb E. At Taste the Rainbow, respond. Or so help me, I'll cover your apartment with kudzu. Silence Casual E. At Taste the Rainbow, you're awake. Right. The greatest earthbender in the world F. At Taste the Rainbow dude. Tell us you haven't kicked the bucket yet. Lord of Thunder G. At Taste the Rainbow, you good, man? Opposite of Satract H. At Taste the Rainbow, respond already so I can get Hatsum off my back. General Mills I. At Taste the Rainbow, you're raising quite the buzz among you as rumor mill. Care to confirm anything? Wouldn't Hitagai with glasses J. At General Mills lay off. He just got out of a coma. At Taste the Rainbow, you're okay, right? Spintoin K. At Taste the Rainbow, come on man. I've got 7 social media posts ready to roll out once you give me the go-ahead. Dad peeked over Izuku's shoulder and snorted. Management kids haven't changed since I was in high school. Izuku grinned. I've never felt so loved. His parents and Wisps all gave him a variety of dirty looks, and he wilted. Okay, maybe I've felt this loved before, just maybe. Taste the rainbow, eh? Mostly okay. Really hungry and ready to nap for another day or so, but otherwise completely healthy. Jury's still out on Pink, but we might be in the clear. Izuku set his phone on his lap, smiling as the Discord server continued to fill with well wishes, demands for comments, requests for approval, and lamentations about Hatsune. Well, sir, you wanted the different courses to be more familiar with each other. I think this is a good start, personally. Nezu chuckled. I think I quite agree, Midoriya-kun, he turned back to Dad. Come by Yua tomorrow around 1:30 p.m. for an interview. I suggest bringing a resume so I can determine where you might fit best on the staff. He grinned and gave a conspiratorial wink. After all, your skills may be useful in more than just the support department. Dad blinked as the mammal walked out of the room, the door sliding shut behind him. Did I just get a job at UA because my kid is a student? Isn't that nepotism or something? Recovery Girl sighed. No, you being Midoriya's father was just a feather in your cap. Truth be told, Nezu's been keeping tabs on your old employers for some time now. Never got the full details, something about extortion and poor employee retention. He's been muttering about sniping their top customer service agent recently. Dad blinked again. You know, I feel like I should be concerned that Nezu of all people has been stalking me, but I'm strangely okay with this. The elderly heroine snorted. That's the right attitude around Nezu, in my experience. Get used to it. Pink suddenly shot upright, and everyone froze. Where's that muscle bird bozo? I'm gonna cut him in half. There was a flash of light, and Red tackled Pink off the table, rubbing his face against hers excitedly as he shouted, You're okay, you're okay, you're okay. Naturally, the other wisps quickly snapped out of their trances and joined him, piling on the stunned Pink and pinning her to the floor in a massive group hug. The only reason Izuku didn't join in was because his legs felt like they were made of stone, and so he stayed in his hospital bed, merely chuckling as he watched the antics of his all but official siblings. After about half a minute or so, most of the others had backed off, and Pink shoved Red's face away from hers, staring up at Izuku. So, what exactly happened? Muscle Dude nearly squeezed you to death. I punched him across the Ustis Plaza, still working out how that happened. Got so angry that my brain shut down. And then 2 days later, we're here in the hospital. Izuku glanced at Katsuki. Mind filling me in on what happened after all Mike dropped us off at the top of the stairs? Katsuki grunted. I'm still not 100% sure, honestly. You just knelt there for a few seconds staring at Pink, and then you activated some kind of berserker state. It almost looked like you went into power mode, except it wasn't a color I've seen you use before. Izuku blinked. Really? Describe it in as much detail as you can. Katsuki frowned, laying a hand on his chin. The first thing that happened was your hair turning purple. It was creepy, almost like the pigments were bleeding into it from your scalp. You floated off the ground a good 6 inches, and thin purple mist flowed out of your skin, then solidified into ghostly claws and fangs. When you opened your eyes, they were completely yellow and glowing. Then some kind of freaky, dark purple energy covered your entire body, almost like a version 2 transformation from that old ninja anime, but purple instead of red. Izuku blinked. Whoa. That sounds like something I wouldn't want to jump out at me from a dark alley. Katsuki grunted. Yeah, I think you scared out of the lead villain when you jumped on Namu and tore it to shreds. Izuku paled. I killed it? Recovery Girl grunted. Hard to kill something that's already dead. Dad blinked. I don't follow. The elderly woman sighed. When the police were cleaning up the Ustya, Namu was surprisingly docile. Even let itself be handcuffed and restrained without putting up a fight. Didn't seem to respond to anything, not a single word. So, out of curiosity, they brought him to me, and I ran a functional MRI. Turns out, its brain is completely inert. Not a single one of its neurons are firing. It's mindless in just about every sense of the word. And from what we gathered, it was like that before Midoriya got his hands on it. Or claws, I guess. Izuku hummed. Okay, that's a little easier on my conscience. Not by much, though. So, how small of shreds are we talking? Katsuki huffed. Tore off most of the skin from its chest and stomach area and ripped its left arm clean off. Recovery Girl grunted. More than that. For some reason, there's a coating of that same purple energy preventing cellular regeneration in areas where the skin got torn off. When one of my nurses cut off a piece of skin for examination, it regrew almost immediately. So it normally heals incredibly quickly, but something with that berserker state of yours is keeping it from healing at all. Izuku frowned. That's weird. What's weirder is that it sounds almost like a wisp power, but the color doesn't match anyone. Pink hummed. Actually, everyone turned to her, and she coughed. Well, even though I was largely unconscious, there was a brief interval where I could feel an insane amount of raw anger. Just pure, unfiltered, primal rage. I'm guessing the other wisps didn't pick up on it, 'cause they were in shock. Izuku hummed. So berserker state is a pretty accurate name for it, huh? If I get too angry, I turn into that, then pass out, and when I wake up, I don't remember anything I did during it. Katsuki grunted. That's one way to put it. It's like you went into some kind of frenzy. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through What If Deku Got All Sentient Quirks. I hope you found it as intriguing and thought-provoking as we did. A big shout out to Goldingient8 for crafting such a compelling story. Don't forget to check out their profile on Archive of Our Own for more amazing works. The link is in the description below. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to What If Deku 2.0 for more fascinating explorations into the world of fanfiction and fantasy. Your support helps us create more content like this, and we're always excited to hear your thoughts and suggestions in the comments section. See you guys in the next video.